everything like that, we can download a copy of the recording from, I think it's called SharePoint. I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
It used to just go right to Microsoft Stream, but it doesn't anymore. You actually have to download the file, and I can save it to Box if you'd like, if that helps, so you can grab it.
Okay.
I can share it with you as well. But if you want to make that, public, to anyone that missed it, like that's what I think we'll have to talk about. And it looks like you got people coming on too. So I can edit this and everything like that. Like, we could talk about it after today.
Okay, and it's actually good that Brianna just joined because we can talk to her about the
Great.
the technical aspects here.
All right, my friend.
Is it, Bill? Is it like a massive file size?
Yeah, it'll probably be a large file size. So,
Okay.
but we can share it.
Yeah,
we have Energy Consulting Vimeo account. We could share it that way, password protected if needed, or we could just open it up.
Okay.
Or we can try to use a different. We could try to get Brianna and others access via Box. Sometimes we can do that too for our customers and our partners, our industry partners, and share that way.
Okay.
But if it's a file that needs to be, placed on someone's external website, after, we can figure all that out.
Yeah. Hi, Ratan. Hi, Reese, and hi, Brianna. How are you guys?
Doing well. Hi there.
Thank you,
Ryan.
Good, thanks.
Hi, thanks for having us today.
Hi, Brianna. Good. Yeah, our pleasure. Hey, Sundar.
Hey, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Brianna, we were just, Bill and I were just talking about the recording of the meeting. I think you had mentioned it would be good to, obviously we're doing it so people who aren't attending can view it after the fact, but you had mentioned something about open meeting notes. Is the intention to put this on Cohasset's website, or like how do you intend to use it? Because it's more just from like a file perspective, like how we share it to you, and how best to transfer it over when we're done.
Okay, if it's possible to have it available so that we could get it posted to our Town of Cohasset YouTube page, that would be great.
YouTube page, okay. Okay.
But that's not a necessity. So if that can't happen, I think as long as we're able to share it out to people who ask us about it, that's all we need. There was a lot of interest last night at the AEC meeting to attend this meeting, but we didn't want to come into violation with open meeting laws. So we told everybody to kind of wait. We'll have some engineers have been invited to this meeting, but we will be showing the committee via recording.
Okay. Okay, so I think that's fine, right, Bill? We should be able to accommodate
absolutely
all of the above there.
We'll figure this out. Yep, not a problem.
Okay, so maybe Brianna will take it.
Great.
We'll take it offline for the time being, and then once we've completed the presentation and everything's done, we can work out the the technical sharing aspect of it and stuff on the back end.
Okay.
All right, great. And it looks like a lot of people just joined, so give me 1 second. Hi, Kevin. Hi, Tanya. And hi, Taffy. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. How are you?
Good.
Great. So we are still waiting on a couple folks, so I'm going to hold off for just another minute or so, and then we can jump in. It looks like, oh, actually, yeah. Reese, you're expecting the full Mass CEC team, right?
Let me check. I know that the other Reese is out today, so it may actually just be me joining, but I'll see if anyone else is planning to come.
Okay, great. I'll give you a minute to check. And Brianna, Tanya, I see both of you and Taffy. Are there other folks from Cohasset that you assume are coming? I didn't see a response from Michelle. I think Steve maybe responded as well.
Yeah, Steve Girardi is going to join us when he can. Michelle Leary is not joining us, is my understanding.
Okay. So I'll let Reese come back and let us know if we should wait for the Mass DEC folks, and then if not, we can jump in. So let's give it one more minute.
You can start up, and I think Ariel will join if she's able to.
Okay, perfect.
Great, thank you.
Alrighty. Okay, well, let me share my screen. Welcome everyone. Whoops. Thank you for joining. We are excited to share both presentations with you today. I guess for the purpose of the recording, I'll introduce myself once more. My name is Ryan Fox. I'm the project manager for the CLEAR project here with Mass DEC. So both Cohasset sites, another third site in Massachusetts, and then we were awarded a screening tool task as well. With me today are Sundar and Kevin on my team. Sundar's from Nexant. Kevin's from my team. I guess both of you guys, if you want to introduce yourselves briefly, please go ahead.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sundar Venkatraman, and I'm with Nexant Resource Innovations, and working with GE on this project.
Thanks.
Keep it short.
Yep. Absolutely.
Hey, and my name's Kevin Ravis. I'm on Ryan's team with GE Energy Consulting, and I've been supporting a lot of the modeling work that we did for the project, and it's been a good one. So I'm excited to have this presentation for everyone.
Great. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so just to reiterate what Kevin and both Kevin and Sundar said, it's been a great project so far. We've enjoyed it. We've learned a lot, and we're excited to share with the group what we've learned and what our ultimate recommendations are for both the Elm Street site and the DPW site. So without further ado, let me jump in. So I'm sorry, the first site we're going to cover is the Elm Street site. Just a reminder, this slide is to provide kind of an outline of how the project was scoped. So, first part was to understand the objectives that were communicated from Cohasset and kind of define the scope, understand the available resources, data, et cetera. Next was task 1.2. That would be the site characterization and microgrid analysis and design. So basically, that's kind of the real meat, I would say, of the upfront work. So it's basically collecting all of the data that would go into the modeling and design effort. So that's both on-site in-person work, data requests, interviews, things of that nature, and then all the way through to the software modeling effort where we determine the least cost microgrid solution and begin the preliminary design work. Task 1.3 was functional design and review of infrastructure. So this is the real technical portion of the design, looking at the distribution network, understanding the communication infrastructure, control infrastructure, protection tech, things of that nature, and really making sure that the economic design that comes out of our modeling software is feasible, and then providing a detailed schematic layout. 1.4, the financial solution. So that's kind of a review of the various ownership/business models, a high-level cost-benefit analysis, and then research and highlight of potential funding sources available both within the state and domestically.
Hi, this is Tanya. Quick question on this, the cost-benefit analysis. So we're going through the BRIC grant, which was one of the potential funding sources you identified. They have their own cost-benefit or benefit-cost analysis, BCA spreadsheet. Is that the basis of your cost-benefit analysis, or did you do any other grant application BCA approach, or was it just a typical economic?
It's a typical economic cost-benefit analysis. I'm not familiar with the BRIC CBA, to be honest with you, the form, but I would imagine most of the data that we've put together would feed into what the BRIC cost benefit analysis has laid out. That Tanya, we can, if you want, we can take that offline maybe, and when you're going through the process, if you want to share what they're looking for, we can maybe advise on some of the line items that are needed.
Okay, that'd be great. I think they have a completely different set of benefits. Yours was more or less energy cost and capacity, things that could be realized through market. They have social benefits and other estimates that avoid outages and stuff like that.
Yeah, we're familiar with the social, the societal benefits. For this one, we were advised not to quantify those. So we did do a write-up in the report on the societal benefits, but did not quantify them. But we are familiar with the process of quantifying those, so we can advise on that if need be. Okay, and then yeah, final task there, obviously reporting and presentation, which is what we're doing currently. So the report is laid out like this. The presentation is also laid out like this. We will go through high-level elements of the report in the slide deck, but feel free to jump in at any time. I would ask for the more in-depth questions, maybe hold till the end, just so we have time to get through the deck, but anything kind of, you know, smaller level detail, feel free to just jump in and ask.
And also, Ryan, if I could add too, feel free to use the chat function as another way that you can collect questions, if especially if they're for the end.
Sure, that's great. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, and I can't see those, so Bill, maybe if there are questions you can that are kind of related to what we're doing immediately, just maybe stop me for a second and share.
Happy to help.
Thanks, appreciate it. Okay. So onward. So task 1.1, define the scope and objectives. You know, in talking with Cohasset, it's nothing that the folks on the call don't already know. Obviously, significant power reliability issues, both due to extreme weather events based on the location of the town, you know, geographically along the coast of Massachusetts, and then obviously at the end of the distribution system line, make it very challenging for the town during outage events. They tend to be longer, they tend to be more likely to occur. And so, you know, the combo of both the lack of reliability and challenge with resiliency really fed into the need to look for areas within the town that could be, you know, bolstered, storm hardened, however you want to call it. One of these areas, obviously the Elm Street microgrid, gave Cohasset a chance to protect some of its most vulnerable members of the community in the elderly and disabled residents who live at the Harborview facility, one of the two facilities that we were looking at here, and then you know, providing a reliable and safe base of operations for the emergency management teams located at the fire and police departments within the town. So, first part of task 2 of characterizing the site is data collection, of course. So 3 different areas that we found data. Obviously, the town through you know, the materials that they had put together for the application process for the CLEAR project. We developed a questionnaire and submitted it to the various stakeholders around town. We obtained energy consumption and peak load at the 2 different buildings, and we obtained a proposal from Cohasset for the police department and fire department lighting improvement project. National Grid, we also worked pretty closely alongside through you know, a myriad of different calls. They provided us GIS drawings. They validated our 1-line representation of the feeders, provided outage logs, provided a whole slew of information that was very helpful for us, gave us average load shapes for buildings where we weren't able to get hourly load shapes. I will get into that in a bit, but very helpful there. And then we performed a site visit where we did a detailed survey of the electric loads at the police department and fire department and Harborview. Obtained pictures, obtained drawings, etc., of the site layout, which really helped in the technical portion of the design. So here, is a one-line diagram, kind of a preliminary sketch out of the electrical infrastructure at the site. Not going to spend a whole lot of time here, fairly technical, but it gives kind of an overview of what we're looking at from the distribution network for the site. You can see the transformers, fuses, etc., the upstream, downstream of the power. All right, load shapes. So like I said, we did collect monthly data for both Harborview and the police department, fire department. And we were also able to collect the kind of class shapes from National Grid. That allowed the combination of those allowed us to derive an 8760 hourly load profile, which is effectively a 1 year profile at an hourly level of the power consumption at each building. That's what's represented here. You can see, obviously, it's kind of looks a little crazy, but there's method to the madness. And effectively what goes on with this data is it feeds into the next step of task 1.2, which is our Homer modeling. So Homer Pro is the microgrid modeling software that we used to do the optimization for the site. What Homer Pro is a piece of software that basically takes a bunch of input data like load shapes, existing generation specifications at the site, outage data, a variety of other things, financial data if you have it, power prices, things of that nature, and you basically cram it all into a magic box, and it runs a bunch of simulations and comes out with a variety of different designs, basically incorporating new renewable generation, new backup gas power generation, all in an effort to both mitigate reliability issues, meaning if there's an outage period, being able to cover load during the outage, but also providing a least cost solution to the end user. So for this, the generation that we included, obviously the 45 kilowatt natural gas backup generator that's already located at site. We had obtained a study from the town that said that there was about 120 kilowatts of potential solar capacity on the rooftops between the two buildings. And then we utilized an open-ended solver solution for a battery system and a generator system. So basically allowing Homer to shift between, optimizing with a battery or optimizing with an additional gas generator, depending on, the reliability metrics and the economic metrics. So what came out of this was obviously a bunch of results. The most economic, and when I say most economic, I mean least cost solution, was to build out the full solar PV array, so the 120 kilowatts, and then add an additional 80 kilowatts of gas-fired backup generation. We discussed this with Mass CEC and Cohasset, and while obviously it being the least cost option, it wasn't really in line with the mission or the mandate derived from CLEAR, which was to promote, a clean, renewable solution. And so we delved a little deeper. The next most economic solution, which is the one that we did choose, was to keep the 45 kilowatt natural gas generator as in the first solution, build out the 120 kilowatts of solar along the rooftop, again, as with the first solution. But instead of adding a gas-fired backup generator, we built out a 200 kilowatt / 7,000 kilowatt hour battery storage system.
Can I ask a question about that? If you could go back, how did you size that versus the 80 kilowatt gas-fired backup generator, which could operate obviously as long as it had gas?
I'm sorry, how do you mean size it?
Well, why did you choose a 200 kilowatt battery versus a 1 megawatt or 500 kilowatt?
Oh, I see. It's because of the peak load at site.
But what about outages? Peak load.
Right. So it's the peak load in terms of kilowatts, and then the duration. Obviously, there's a 7,000 kilowatt hour. There's a duration metric in there that is factored in to accommodate the 5-day outage period.
Okay, so it's a 5-day. We're going.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, 5-day outage period is what we used as a base case. We also did scenarios with a 3-day outage and a 7-day outage, which we'll highlight a little bit later. But so this is just kind of a overview of some of the results that came out of the Homer modeling software. So the backup generator, we have some of the results on the left. You can see hours of operation, number of starts, capacity factor in the year. You can see some of the fuel consumption metrics, et cetera. And then on the right, just the generation heat map. You can see during the outage period, which was simulated in February, there is the generator ramps up and then slowly ramps down as the outage period goes away and normal operations resume. So here is the solar simulated solar PV operations. Again, some of the modeling characteristics on the left in the tables. You can see the rated capacity, total production in the year, capacity factor in the year, maximum output in the year, levelized cost, et cetera, hours of operation. And then on the right, another heat map showing the power output throughout the year based on hours in the day, obviously performing during the sunny hours of the day and not during the evening and early morning hours. And lastly, the simulated battery operations and the total monthly electric production on the bottom. So for the purposes of the initial exercise here, the battery is only concerned with mitigating the resiliency issue. So that is why you see the state of charge reduced in February, and then it gets slowly charged back up to 100% in the subsequent months. There is demand response factored into this analysis outside of Homer. So we did do some arbitrage and some demand response participation program analysis for the purposes of this project. It was just not done within our modeling software, and that is why you see kind of a steady state of charge outside of the outage period. So the left, obviously, just the standard state of charge chart. Right, similar profile, just showing the heat map. And then the bottom is the obviously the monthly electric production, showing that majority of the power is coming from the grid. Some of the previous peak load on site obviously offset through the PV, and then the period of outage in February is covered by the 45 kilowatt gas power generator.
So you're assuming there's only one outage a year? Is that what this is basically running off of?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So Homer Pro only allows for a single outage per year. There are, like I said, we did a variety of different outage lengths just to make sure that we were covering our bases. But yeah, and I think the presumption is like if you're, if you can cover it for a 5-day outage in February, it should be able to cover again for a 5-day outage in June, again, October, again. It's solving for resiliency. So it's making sure that there's enough generation to cover that outage period and then actually a reserve margin above that. But yeah.
So, and you picked February, is that the peak because of the Harborview heat pumps, or is that the peak because of the police fire station?
It's
in the summer. So.
Yeah. So you can basically pick four different outage periods, basically seasonally. We picked a winter outage period just because that seemed to make the most sense when we reviewed outage data. That seemed like it was where the majority of the outage periods occurred.
Okay, just so you know, and I know you can only run one outage, we in Cohasset average 3.5 outages a month. It's how often we have outages. So they're all different spans. In the last 10 years, we've had more than 4 days twice. But it sounds like this analysis accomplishes what you're trying to show. It just would not show the benefit of the reliability because of the way this is worked.
Right. Yeah. So like a 6-hour outage or 12-hour outage, we're not simulating something of that nature, but it is sized to cover a full 5-day outage. So presumably, a shorter outage period would be covered within the confines of what we have solved for.
Okay, perfect. So what you're saying is basically you solve for the 5-day outage because we said 5
Yes.
days. Let's assume 5 days because we've had more than 4 days twice
Yes.
in the last 10 years. You solve for 5. We know we're sized to be able to cover for 5. So we will cover the worst case that we've experienced in the last 10 years. And then if there's smaller outages, we'll cover some of that.
Exactly, and the benefit that you have, which again we can cover, in a little bit, is with a battery of that size. If you kind of do a little more seasonal analysis, okay, statistically we haven't seen as many outages in the summer months. You have a pretty large battery there that you can bid into the demand response program and earn some revenue back to offset some of the operating costs that you have for the microgrid annually. So there's benefit even if the rainy day situation where there aren't outages in a year, so you have fewer outages, you still have an asset that can generate value. Okay. Any other questions here before we move on? Okay. So task 1.3, functional design. I know this is a little tight to see. This is the microgrid schematic that was designed. Not going to go into a whole lot of detail here. One thing I did want to highlight was part of the analysis was that the Cohasset team requested that we add some additional EV charging stations. So there are 4 EV charging stations total that we added at the Harborview site and an additional 2 at the PD and FD. We did some pretty detailed load calculations. I'm not going to go into that just because we have some limited time, but we were fairly confident that we were addressing the peak load that could be generated through those additional charging stations. And then you can see obviously there's an additional PCC I think that we added, and then the battery is linked in, and you can see the battery up near the up above the PV array, 30 kilowatt above the PD and FD building, and then some PV arrays kind of scattered along the Harborview buildings. Okay. One more bit on the functional design. So, the microgrid control strategy, obviously in a normal state, the intent is that the microgrid will operate as usual, except there's an additional connection at the police and fire department to the main grid. The additional generation that we've installed, that we modeled and discussed previously, that will continue to operate during normal conditions. The backup generator, the 45 kilowatt natural gas generator, will be offline in a normal state. So obviously that means the battery storage system will operate in its state of charge, whether it's involved in a demand response program or bidding into an aggregator into the power market. It needs to be determined for the town on how to handle that, but that'll be online, and obviously the solar PV will continue to generate electricity for the town when the sun is shining. Emergency state, the microgrid controller that will be installed to oversee the operations of the microgrid will continuously monitor the point of common couplings, the PCCs. There are 2 of those that were highlighted on the previous page. When there's a grid outage detected by the controller, all of the facilities in the microgrid are then isolated from the main grid, and effectively what happens is they open the breaker there. When in islanded mode of operation, the microgrid generators match the total load of the facilities to make sure that there is a constant state of balance within the microgrid. So fairly straightforward, but just need to highlight how it works. Okay, task 1.4, financial solution. So we did do kind of a high-level overview of the ownership models that could be considered for Cohasset when looking at the Elm Street microgrid. So the first 100% ownership of the assets, that would give the most autonomy over the assets. It's also the most expensive option. It would also require Cohasset to either operate and maintain the microgrid itself or hire a third-party service provider to do that. That's not the most challenging thing to do in the world, of course, but it is kind of an added level of complexity. Another issue with 100% ownership option is that it could be subject to objections through National Grid. They don't have very well developed tariffs around how microgrids are owned within their footprint or operated. And so that is still kind of taking form. Assuming everything gets cleared appropriately and there's no objection through National Grid, this is the option that the project team believes is the ideal option. And it's only because the overall cost seems to be within an acceptable range, and it seems like the most critical element of this project is to maintain reliability and resiliency, and to do that, it's critical that the town has absolute autonomy over the assets and how they're used. And so that was kind of the rationale there.
Yeah, let me jump in because this also is the public-private joint ownership. There is no public right-of-way that's crossed on this design, correct?
Right. Yep.
So it's a private drive.
Yep.
And so there's no crossing a public right-of-way, so we don't violate a monopoly franchise service territory right of National Grid. But what you're saying is, unless we get in on a clean peak program for the battery or a smart 2.0 for the solar, we would not be guaranteed any revenues associated with these assets unless we participated directly in the ISO New England market.
That's
through 2222.
Right. Exactly right. Yep. You could join up with an aggregator through through the FERC rule and have them bid into the market. That is probably less ideal. Again, because when you join with an aggregator, you lose some control over how your assets are used. So from our perspective, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but from our perspective, utilizing the demand response program gave Cohasset more autonomy over how its assets were used, because it allows you to bid in directly your own assets, and you can choose how much. Take the demand response program, for example. It allows you to bid in how much kilowatt peak load you're willing to take on within a season or within a program. And that just seemed like the most bang for your buck, when the intent is to be maybe not as risk averse as possible, but certainly leaning towards the risk averse end. But like I said, jumping a little bit ahead, so I guess the other options, public, there's not a lot of understanding around the legality of such an arrangement, so we didn't really spend a whole lot of time there. The public-private, as Tanya mentioned, there's kind of an obvious partner with National Grid. There's limited shared capital expenditures, as we learned, but it certainly would be at least some capital expenditure share. It's probably the most legally defined arrangement given current market rules, just because National Grid owns, you're right, there's no assets in the public way, but they do own the distribution equipment that the microgrid would be connected to.
But they're not legally allowed to own generation.
Right.
And they have, I don't think they've been owning batteries except in a demonstration project or a non-wires alternative way.
Sure. Right. And yeah, and that's fine. And so I think the thought was that this would be the option to seek more information on should a 100% ownership approach be rejected for any reason. And then lastly, there's always the third party energy as a service provider option, least expensive option for Cohasset, least amount of oversight for Cohasset, least amount of autonomy for Cohasset. You really don't have a whole lot of control over how the assets are used. There are some workarounds, basically how, it's use cases that you can work into your negotiations with a contract. But, in discussions with Mass CEC, we kind of determined that the resiliency as a service option is not a well-defined ownership approach at this point, and it hasn't really been fleshed out too well. And so given kind of the risk profile of the ownership options, this was not one of the ones that we decided we would move forward with recommending.
And so if we did 100% ownership, do you have a recommendation on how we'd realize some of the tax benefits associated with solar and batteries under an ITC arrangement, given that we don't pay taxes?
We didn't do any evaluation on ITC, but we can maybe have a discussion of that offline, because we do that on other projects. We were mostly looking more at the funding opportunities here, but I can get into that on the next slide if that's all right. So, and I guess that kind of couples us also with the BCA question that you had, Tanya. So this is kind of an overview both of the cost, the capital investment cost buildup. So on the table on the bottom left, you can see the different components that would build into the capital investment cost. We estimated that at about $6.3 million. And then, as we kind of alluded to at the beginning in the discussion on the BCA, we were asked not to quantify the societal benefits for this analysis, so that portion of the BCA was left more as like a qualitative discussion portion of the report. And then we did do some analysis on the SMART program, utilizing Massachusetts online calculator, and then we did some back of the envelope demand response value, utilizing kind of a range of different potential kilowatt reductions that the town could pledge into the programs, and assessing the different program types being seasonal or year round, and the various payback options. We did kind of a statistical approach there to hone in on a range of demand response value, and kind of what the likelihood of Cohasset opting into various programs might be. And so, obviously total benefits, total costs exceed total benefits by quite a bit. But again, I would just hesitate to say, this does not include societal benefits that are obviously a major part of the project here. And so I think it's important just to realize that. So financial solution funding opportunities, here's just a couple of the ones that we wanted to highlight. Obviously the MVP action grant, Cohasset has utilized funding through this program prior. It's up to $1 million with a 25% cost share. 2022 fiscal year was recently completed, so they wouldn't open up for funding again until this coming spring. I'm sorry, spring of 23. But the program covers a pretty wide variety of funding that we thought would be valuable to the town.
Could you go back? So what's the bogey we're trying to fill? Is it the, so if you look at is it the difference between the 6.8 million in cost versus 7.5 in potential benefit? Or I'm sorry, the opposite. Is it 7.5 in cost versus 6.8 in benefits? So around 700,000 to make this make sense? Or like, what would we need to get from funding to make this an economic project to take before the town?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have numbers of what what Cohasset is willing to spend out of your own accounts, right? So we're looking at this strictly through kind of a lens of making sure that you realize the kind of the outset of the project, which is the resiliency and reliability aspect, and then keeping it as least cost as possible. And the only reason I kind of sidestep that is because, you know, the most economic solution that we came up with was declined. And that was based on the fact that we were looking to, you know, keep this as renewable as possible. And so, you know, that being understood, the thought was, okay, we're going to design the project based on the specifications that we've been provided, and then try to do the best in terms of minimizing cost. And so I don't know that there's necessarily a target offset cost that you're looking for. I think it's the most that you can possibly get, right? Because you're probably not going to offset, you know, a $6.8 million or minus $6.8 million net benefit. You're going to try to offset it with, you know, $1 million here, a couple $100,000 there, and then try to fill in where you can.
I understand, but I'm trying to understand with these numbers, is this basically saying if we got more than 700,000 or so, say 800, if we got $1 million in funding,
yep,
would this be a situation where the costs are now below the benefits and therefore would make sense from a economic point of view?
No, so the total costs in the table are 7.5 million and the total benefits are 700,000, right? So the net benefit, the costs exceed by about $6.8 million. So it would be in the red about 6.8 million.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So my little mute button thing is covering
those
bottom two lines, which are pretty important. Okay,
no
so the economic benefit, and did the was the fossil fuel one also negative net benefit, or did it show positive net benefit?
We didn't do a BCA for the fossil fuel one. We didn't proceed beyond that. Yeah. But again, you know, I think per your comment up front, this negates or does not include societal benefits, which you know, I think from our perspective would be quite sizable. It might not make it net zero, but it would definitely get it a lot closer. And then,
but on the other hand, if we got like a brick grant that would give us 75%, and we could look at around $730,000 of benefit to offset our 25% share. Now things are starting to look a little closer. Is that?
Yeah. I think obtaining funding from a brick grant or you know, one of the other grants that we highlighted in the funding section, you know, say you get $1 million or $1.5 million or whatever you're able to obtain, that makes, that pencils this a lot closer to, you know, I would say a sound investment. And again, it's difficult because we're not showing the full benefit without societal benefits to the town, et cetera, resiliency benefits, which are important, but it just wasn't part of our scope to quantify that.
That's fine, but again, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking from selling it to the town's perspective. If you know, just if 75% of that cost was covered and we were responsible for 25%, and of that 728,000 would come to us in the form of revenue streams.
Yep.
It's that difference that we have to make a decision on the societal benefits.
Right.
Great.
So if you can get 75% of it covered, you know, you'd probably be on the hook for maybe $2 million left to cover through the town. I think it's probably a pretty loose estimate, but yeah, that would be the required funding.
Okay, and this does not include roof replacement, right?
It does not, no.
And did you look at the roofs? I think they're maybe 15, I don't know. I think they're ready for replacement like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we didn't do any siding work, part of the scope, yeah. That would be probably the next level of analysis. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you know, we covered the MVP. Obviously, the brick funding is critical, and that's one of the ones that we highlight as being, top level for Cohasset to go forth. Some of the other ones, little less likely, Coastal Resiliency Grant and Green Communities Grant. I know Cohasset's already a green community. There is funding available there. There's potential to get funding to cover additional study work done that would probably be needed from like an engineering perspective. There's also funding for expanding the charging capability. Lots of different areas that could cover smaller pieces of the project through the Green Communities Grant. So just some items to consider there. Yeah. So lastly, the recommendations piece. The project team, I think we recommend pursuing the Elm Street microgrid. It seems like a pretty sound project from our perspective. What that includes is pursuing the 120 kilowatt solar rooftop application, procuring the battery, keeping the gas fire generation in the basement of the PDFD, and then our overall estimate is approximately $7 million for the full development, and then we estimate about $50,000 annually for maintenance and operations of the microgrid. The team recommends pursuing 100% ownership of the microgrid, and then we would also suggest hiring out third-party service company to manage the operations and maintain the microgrid assets. And then lastly, this is pretty critical that it hinges on the ability to get MVP and or FEMA BRIC funding or other funding to help with the upfront capital expenditures. And then also, it would be probably an important step to join the Connected Solutions Demand Response Program through National Grid and or Massachusetts Clean Peak Standard. That would help offset kind of the 50K annually that we had highlighted as the maintenance and operations. It would roughly net it out to zero, and so that's a big help, I think, for the town. So that's the Elm Street presentation high level. Happy to take additional questions, comments. I think we have till about 3 o'clock for any discussion around Elm Street, and then we'll jump into the DPW. But yeah, thank you for the comments and questions throughout the project. Thank you for the help and feedback on Elm Street throughout the last couple months. We hope this is a helpful analysis and will help guide additional study work and hopefully future procurement of the microgrid. So thank you from the team. So yeah, now I'll open it up for questions or comments.
I'll start and then I'll let others ask questions. This is Tanya.
Yep.
These costs seem really high. So I'm just wondering, can you give us some sort of what generally were the estimates you used for solar? Was it $1,000 per kW, $2,000? I think you said there is no ITC involved, no tax credits included, because this is looking at 100% owned with grant funding.
Yep.
And then also the battery. What were the dollar per kilowatt hour that you were assuming?
Sure. The solar offhand, I believe, was $1,000 kilowatt. I don't have the battery storage system numbers offhand. I can share those with you offline. The database comes from Homer Pro, the modeling software, and effectively what they do is they collect. They have their own database of equipment that's online throughout the country that they collect cost data for and compile for battery storage and just for the battery storage system. Actually, no, I'm sorry, for both battery storage and solar PV. Those were open-end solvers. We did ultimately solve solar PV as forcing 120 kilowatts just because it was consistently being the most economic solution. But when I say open-ended solution, what it effectively does is it takes a generic value. So it takes an average value of all of the costs that it has compiled within the data set, and takes that average cost of a lithium ion battery, for example, excuse me, and then that's the figure it applies for the system. So yes, I think I agree with you, Tanya, that the costs are maybe a little bit high for the solar and for the battery system, but from the perspective of our analysis, it was the most reliable, I'll say, source of data that we could put forth. And then the distribution equipment, protection equipment, control and communication equipment, and miscellaneous equipment and services come from internal GE, from figures that we have from previous microgrid development projects that we've put together in the past. So those are hard data. We can't share specifics there because they're from specific projects, and it's they're beholden by NDAs, but they are more precise, maybe not precise, but more grounded in firm reality versus the average cost base for the generation assets. And then I should say the initial design and planning, that figure came from an average of an analysis that we did looking through the NYSERDA prize projects. So effectively, NYSERDA did a microgrid analysis of, a statewide analysis of, I want to say something like 86, something, the number escapes me, but something like 86 microgrid sites across the state, feasibility assessments, and they had tables, all BCA tables with costs associated to the projects. We took the initial design and planning costs based on the size of the project and scaled it, and then took average costs for that. And then fixed O&M and variable O&M come out of the Hummer model as well. So. Any additional questions? Comments, anything? Okay, so I guess given that, I think we have a little time before 3. I think what we can do maybe is take a few minutes break.
Ryan, Ryan, there's one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill. Thanks.
There's a question in the chat. I just saw this pop up. Would this microgrid provide power for all of the 16 buildings at 16 Elm Street?
Yeah. Yes, it's the full Harborview load. Yep.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Okay, so if there's no more questions or comments, what we'll do is we'll take a 5-minute break. So we'll come back at 2:57, and then we'll resume on DPW.
Yeah, this is Tanya, and before we take the break, which is fine, and I'll be a little bit, I'll be a little bit late coming back on, but I will be back on. My question is, are you taking into account the national grid increase in electricity prices that starts November 1st, that takes it up to 2.8 cents a kilowatt hour? Was that the basis for the savings, or are you using the old tariff?
I'm sorry, the basis for the savings, you mean?
The electricity generation savings, reduction in generating costs?
No. We we didn't have that information available when we put that.
Okay, and so the SMART program, same thing. You're just giving us a credit that doesn't it doesn't take a difference of what we'd have to.
The SMART program savings was strictly through the calculator that the Mass DOER has on their site.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked through that given the assets and the sizing and everything. The reduction in generating costs was effectively taking the base the required procurement that we had from National Grid through the bills, and then offsetting it against what was being generated through the pairing of the solar and the battery. And
I see. So our all-in cost, so that's basically the difference in generating costs between the all-in cost levelized over the 20 years of battery and solar versus an assumption about the National Grid tariff.
Right, exactly.
And that assumption about the National Grid tariff does not include the November 1st increase.
It does not, no.
Okay, so there'd be a higher reduction in generating costs.
Yes, there would be higher reduction in generating costs bearing that change in tariff, yes.
Okay, I think it'd be helpful for us to know what you assumed with respect to the National Grid tariff and the escalation assumptions, if you assumed it would stay flat or would increase at inflation.
Sure, yep. I mean, offhand, I don't know what the assumption was. I think we assumed a flat rate, but I can certainly look into our modeling, our Excel file and check.
And do we get the underlying Excel file for these numbers just so that we can run scenarios or understand what is underlying these assumptions?
We do not share those, no. Apologies. It's there's some proprietary stuff that we have baked into the analysis that we can't share.
Okay, that's it for me. So we'll be back in like 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, let's say 3 o'clock. It's 2:55 now, so we'll do a 5-minute break and then we'll start up again at 3.
And Ryan, this is Bill. You have more chat questions coming in, so sorry to
That's okay.
Cut off between.
Why don't I back out and then I can look and address them.
No, you're okay. So Taffy had a follow-up question after you explained how the microgrid would provide power to all 16 buildings.
Sure.
That follow-up question was how much of the solar power is projected to be on the 60 Elm Street roofs? I don't know if you have that information, and after you answer that, there's another question.
Off the top of my head, I don't have the number. We do have it in the schematic, but it would require me to add a bunch of numbers up, and we will share this this presentation with you, and I could answer that. Bill, the questions that we get in the
I'll be happy to copy them. Yep.
Are they copied? Okay, thank you.
I can.
So I'll follow up. Yep. Yeah, I'll follow up on the questions if I'm not able to answer them live here, and then I'll make sure that the folks who ask specific questions like that get their responses. But we do have it marked out. But just bear in mind this is a high level feasibility study, so there would need to be a siting, an engineering and siting study done on the roofs to fully comprehend that. We were given a study from the town that, based on previous analysis, that gave us that there was 120 kilowatt solar capability, and so that was what we were basing our assumptions off of. So I just want to make that clear. It did come from a previous study, but there is an engineering layer that comes after a feasibility study that needs to be done before full procurement is moved forward with.
Thanks, Ryan. And then Brianna had a question. She's asking if you can dive a little bit deeper into the annual $50,000 maintenance cost a bit, and what was the cost accounting for specifically?
Yeah, so that's Brianna, that's the fixed O&M piece here. That's, so you see 48,917 is an annualized value, so we effectively rounded it to 50 for the purposes of the quote there. And like I said, that comes out of Homer. So there's a dollar per kilowatt hour or dollar per kilowatt assumption baked into the assets that are being utilized on the microgrid. I can go on Homer and I can pull some assumptions on it. I don't know how much detail you want there, but a fixed O&M is like a salary, or it could be a contract that you solicit through a third-party contractor who provides services and maintenance, things of that nature. Variable O&M tends to be more based on fuel costs, things of that nature. So I don't know if that helps kind of discern between the two levels of costs.
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, somebody.
May I add a
yeah, please, Sundar.
Sentence or two. Okay, so I think a lot of those costs, the fixed costs, were towards maintaining the battery capacity, if I recall correctly.
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of the fixed O&M expense would be required to obtain or to maintain the battery, right?
Yeah, particularly the capacity degrades over time, so you may have to add new modules, and I believe those were some of the major costs of the component of the fixed O&M.
Okay.
You're caught up with all questions, Ryan.
Caught up? Okay.
Yep.
Well, it is now 3 o'clock, so maybe we'll just jump back in. Give me 1 second to take a sip of water before I keep going on. Sorry, a little bit dry. Okay. All right, so we'll jump back into the DPW site. This one a little bit less cut and dry, to say the least, in terms of just the project timeline and how things went, but definitely an interesting one. So, did I start it on the wrong one here? I did. Sorry. Let me jump back through. All right, current slide. There we go. Okay, DPW. Not going to spend any time here. I think everybody at this point is familiar with the task outline. Again, not going to jump through the town high level needs. I think everybody's also familiar now with that, reliability issues with extreme weather events and location on the national grid distribution system lines creates a need for additional resiliency and reliable power access. In this particular project, the big element or the big kind of intriguing factor is that Cohasset has the agreement where they offtake all of the power generated at a 450 kilowatt solar PV facility, which is located adjacent to the DPW site, or however you want to say it, just on kind of right next to the site. The scope on this one kind of formed as we were talking it through after the project kicked off, but effectively it kind of split into two avenues. The first being looking at what it would take to develop a small microgrid at the DPW site amongst the various buildings. And then the second was evaluating a potential mobile storage solution, which would utilize the power generated from the solar PV array, but effectively allow the town to transfer the energy from the array into a mobile battery to other buildings around the town during an outage. So pretty unique concept, but definitely an interesting one, obviously, and one that we had a good time evaluating. So you can kind of see the note at the bottom. I have a slide covering this in a couple slides up. We did ultimately determine that the microgrid at the DPW site, the small microgrid, was infeasible. I'll cover that in more detail in a moment, but just please note the majority of this presentation does focus on the mobile storage solution and not on the microgrid. That said, again, not going to spend a lot of time here because we covered this in the previous presentation, but we obtained a bunch of information from Cohasset through a bunch of different resources. I think with this one, the only additional resources we had were the solar PV 15-minute production data, some of the invoices from CoSolar LLC, which is the I guess the partner company or the owner of the solar asset that that Cohasset has the PPA with, and then some of the PV solar as-built drawings. National Grid data, the same, kind of the same deal. And then we did another site visit here to obtain information on the buildings and the solar PV array. So this is the DPW site one-line diagram. Again, not spending a whole lot of time here, but you can see the various buildings, various loads outlined. And this actually is kind of a helpful transition to the next slide, which kind of walks through why the microgrid was infeasible. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies. So we have the load profile as the next slide, but then we'll talk about why the microgrid was infeasible. So yeah, again, the DPW facility total load here, which was derived basically taking the monthly electric bills and assigning them to typical hourly load profiles for different types of facilities that we obtained from National Grid. So basically, again, compiling the two against each other for hourly load shapes. Okay, so quick note on why we determined the infeasibility of the DPW microgrid. So as I said up front, it was the project was kind of two separate but related concepts. The first was the mobile storage charging facility standalone power capability, determining what it could do in terms of what kind of charging capability could be made available to the town if they were to go down that avenue. The second was the development of the small microgrid. So the issue at hand was basically the recycling facility that's located at the DPW site is a 3-phase load. There was a 35 kilowatt generator in the basement of the recycling center that was not operable. So we were advised to remove it from our analysis. With that generator removed, based on our technical assessment, Cohasset would have needed to add or remove something within the microgrid effectively to simplify it, to make the system work, right? And the two options there were basically to drop the recycling facility from the microgrid, which was far and away the cheapest solution, but basically was kind of eliminated the need for a microgrid, for lack of better discussion. It was, the recycling facility was far and away the most substantial load at the site. There were pretty much minimal loads. There's like a salt shed and I think another building on site that would have been paired to island during an outage. So it wasn't really the best use of funds, I guess I would say, following that option. And then the alternative was to retain the inoperable generator or to add a new gas generator in the basement of the recycling center that would have been able to handle the 3-phase load. And then in addition to that, upgrading the entire site's electric infrastructure to allow it to operate on 3 phases. So that would have allowed the recycling facility into the microgrid, but it would have required new tie-in with generation, and it would have required a very substantial distribution infrastructure upgrade at substantial cost to the town. And then effectively when we weighed these options with Mass DEC and with the Cohasset AEC, we determined that it probably wasn't worth the effort to continue the evaluation here, as it didn't seem to be a critical critical facilities to be able to island during an outage. And also we wanted to really focus hard on the mobile storage concept at that stage in the project, which was we were about halfway through task 1.3 when we determined the infeasibility. So wanted to shift our resources fully to the mobile storage concept. So that's kind of the background there. Just wanted to give that feedback just because it's we did our best to highlight this in the report and then obviously in this subsequent presentation, but it's a noticeable change in focus, and so that's just kind of the high level explanation as to why. So that said, Sundar, I think I'll turn it over to you here, right, for the kind of the mobile charging concept discussion, and then I can take it back, I guess, when you're done walking through this.
Okay, sounds good. So the concept that we explored here was to have mobile storage units that could be used to meet the load, meet the demand, wherever that was needed within the town. So the concept that we came up with was so basically there would be 2 mobile storage units, and later on Ryan's going to be talking about using electric school buses, but I think it's a lot easier to use the concept of 2 mobile storage units, and then from there we can easily understand how this concept could work using electric school buses. But the idea is this: so there'll be 2 battery storage units parked at the DPW site, and it'll be charged using the energy from the solar arrays at that site. And whenever there's an outage, these 2 units would basically take turns in meeting the load. So just to understand this concept a little bit easier, I have a chart, a figure on the next slide, but there are 2 batteries, battery 1 and battery 2. And for a 7-day outage, let's look at a 7-day outage. The outages could be 5 days or 7 days or 3 days. We looked at all 3 options. So both battery 1 and battery 2 will be parked at the DPW site, and then when an outage happens, battery 1 would be driven to whatever location that needs to be served, and that's the flexibility with this concept. So you can pick which facility or facilities are critical, and as long as they have the receiving infrastructure, you can drive your mobile storage to that particular facility and power it. So basically, battery 1 would power the facility on day 1 of the outage, day 3, day 5, and day 7, and then it would come back when it's at the end of the day. It would come back and recharge. So it'll basically recharge from the solar panels on day 2, day 4, and day 6. And then similarly, battery 2 would be driven to the facility, and it'll discharge on day 2, day 4, and day 6, and then it'll charge on day 3 and day 5. So that's basically the concept. The 2 batteries would take turn charging and discharging. And that way the load is met throughout that 7-day period. So in order to look at this concept, obviously we don't really know what facility it's serving, because that's yet to be decided. It could be, I guess, a fire station somewhere in the town, or a different location. So what we said was, let's just assume a certain size of load, and we went with 3 different sizes: 500 kilowatt hours, 600, and 700 kilowatt hours per day. That's the energy that needs to be served at that facility. And just for reference, the energy consumption, the daily energy consumption at the police and fire department was roughly 350 kilowatt hours, just as a guide. So we're looking at 500, 600, and 700 kilowatt hours. And we also looked at 4 different certainty levels. And I'll define what a certainty level is a little bit later, but 100% certainty means that this solution would work 100% of the time. So any time there's an outage, 7-day outage, this solution would work 100% of the time. And then obviously a 95% solution would work only 95% of the time. And I guess depending on the facility that you're using this mobile storage solution for, you may need 100%. For example, if it's powering a fire department or a police department, you might need 100%. On the other hand, if it's not a critical facility, 95% might be sufficient. And then finally, we also looked at 3 different outages, as I mentioned before, just to come up with a more thorough and a more robust solution. And bullet number 3, we only had about 2 to 3 years of actual PV data from the site. But in order to have a solution that would work under all conditions, we ended up synthesizing hourly data for the PV farm, and we were able to get 18 years of hourly PV data, synthesized data, that we used for our solution. And for example, this 18 years of hourly data is roughly 2,200 5-day periods, and 100% certainty solution would work for all 2,200 5-day periods, sample periods. Whereas a 95% certainty solution would work approximately 2,100 times out of 2,200. So that's just to give you an idea of what's a perfect solution and versus a 95% certainty solution. And then the last bullet just says that we could not use our standard Homer model for this design because this is a little bit unique. And so we had to really come up with our own model, and we used a solver called OpenSolver to actually find the optimal solution for the battery sizing. So next slide, Ryan, if you could change. All right. So what you're seeing on this slide is on the left side. It's got a lot of information, but I'll try to simplify that. So on the left-hand side, top corner, you see the chart, and the red lines, the red horizontal lines, indicate the load. So for example, the first line is approximately at 700 kilowatt hours. So that's the load that you're trying to serve. So if you want to serve that load this is for a 7-day outage period. And what is shown there is on the top left-hand side, if you want to serve a load of 700 kilowatt hours with 95% certainty, what's the size of the first battery, which is 1,277 kilowatt hours, and what's the size of the second battery, which is 1,168 kilowatt hours. Actually, let me just take a step back. So if you had no sun at all, if all the days were cloudy days, then the first battery would have to be sized at 2,800 kilowatt hours, 4 times 700 kilowatt hours, because then you can use it to serve the load for 4 days, 700 kilowatt hours each. And then the second battery would have to be sized at 3 times 700 or 2,100 kilowatt hours. So the total battery sizing would be 2,800 plus 2,100 or 4,900 kilowatt hours. So that's the battery size that you would need if there was no sun at all. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to use some of the solar energy to charge the battery. So you could get by with a smaller battery, and if you're willing to have a less certain solution, you could get away with a still smaller battery. So that's really what all this is trying to convey. So again, going back to the chart on the top left, if you have to serve a load of 700 kilowatt hours, if you want 100% certainty, then battery 1 would be sized at 2,173 kilowatt hours. I'm reading off the numbers on top of that chart. And then battery 2 would be sized at 1,797 kilowatt hours, still a lot less than 4,900 kilowatt hours. And then if you're willing to live with a 95% certainty, then battery 1 would be 1,277 kilowatt hours. I'm not able to point using my mouse here. And then the battery 2 would be 1,168 kilowatt hours. So a lot less than 4,900 kilowatt hours. So And the charts on the right basically shows how this thing would operate, how battery 1 and battery 2 would operate. For example, battery 1 at the beginning period is almost fully charged. It's sitting and waiting for the outage to happen. And then the outage happens on day 1. And then you can see that battery 1 is being discharged completely on day 1. I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but right, yeah. And then, yes, thanks. And then day 2, the battery 1 is driven back to the DPW site, and it soaks up the sun and gets charged, fully charged. And then, day 3, it's driven to the site and it gets partially discharged and so on. And then similarly, you can see battery 2 is fully charged before the event occurs. Day 1, it does nothing. And then day 2, it goes to that site and it gets fully discharged. And then day 3, it comes back and gets charged. So that's it, the battery is alternate. So that's basically the concept that we worked out and sized the storage units based on that concept. So any questions? No questions?
So,
okay.
Yeah, this is Tanya. So what are we talking about? Are we talking, what's the peak of the batteries you sized to? And the second question is, do they discharge at 120 volt or amps, 120 or 240?
Okay, so all we're trying to determine here is what's the size, the kilowatt hours of the battery. Mm-hmm. The actual kilowatts would depend on the peak load at the site that's receiving, and we don't know what that is really, right? Because we are just saying that this mobile unit could be driven up to any critical facility, and as long as that facility has the receiving infrastructure, it could power that facility. So we don't know the peak load, but one thing clear is that the battery cost is really going to depend more on the kilowatt hours than the kilowatt. The cost of the receiving infrastructure will obviously depend on the kilowatt, on the peak load, but the cost of the battery solution itself is more dependent on the kilowatt hours, and so that's what we focused on.
Right. So as you know, the lithium-ion batteries tend to be 2-hour, 4-hour.
Right.
So are we talking about a 1 megawatt battery to get the 2173 on a 2-hour discharge?
So these batteries can be a slow battery. So you don't need a 1 hour battery or a 2-hour battery. These could be a lot slower because you're draining that battery over a day, right? And,
right. And do those exist, or would you be using a 2-hour or 4-hour discharge battery?
You can pick the slowest battery, a 4-hour battery or an 8-hour battery. You can always discharge a battery slower than its rating. That's not an issue.
Yep.
So okay. you would pick and like I said, the battery costs to a large extent depend on the capacity, on the kilowatt hours. There's a small variation in price due to the how fast the battery is, but that's not usually that significant. But for this application, you would pick the slowest battery because you have 1 day to drain it. You're not going to drain it in an hour or 2.
Right, and so that's what I guess I'm asking, which is what's commercially available.
Any battery, any lithium, you would pick the slowest battery, of course. So depending on the peak load. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I guess that's my question. The 8-hour batteries would be lower cost.
Yes.
And are those commercially available? And is there like a 16-hour battery that's commercially available, or is it you're looking at 8-hour batteries?
Yeah, you get batteries, that can be drained. Lithium batteries typically, you have some technology that can be drained in an hour. These are fast batteries, and then you have some technologies that can be drained in 4 hours. And I've seen batteries with 8 hours discharge, but the thing is, if you're draining them slower than that, you know that's not a problem. So you can buy a 4-hour battery and then drain them in 24 hours, and that's not an issue. So we have not looked at specifically if there are batteries that are meant for 24-hour discharge. I don't think we've looked at that, but this exercise was more to size the batteries.
Yeah.
Get the kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
This was a capability exercise versus a procurement exercise.
Sure, but then it translates into a cost. So that's, I guess I'm jumping the gun on 3 sections. So I'll ask that question again in the cost section.
Sure.
But it ties to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Right, back to you.
Thanks, Sundar. Any other questions here before we move on? Bill, are we all clear on the chat?
All clear.
Cool. All right. So moving on, this is the schematic that our technical team designed for the charging station, or the charging site rather. Leave it here for a second. Not gonna spend too much time here. Okay, so the financial solution. So this is kind of taking the main scope of the project, which was the calculating the capability at the site, and then trying to translate it into something maybe tenable, just to understand what we'd be looking at in terms of a solution, right? So based on that storage capability analysis, what we took away was the team estimated a battery size to serve a 700 kilowatt hour day load during an outage period. And we assumed the 100% certainty piece. And then there's the 3-day outage. There is the 5-day outage, 7-day outage. You can see the interrelated sizes of the batteries needed for charge and discharge there. So extending the assumptions to a school bus solution, basically we took a previously done report by the Mass DOER from 2020. Basically, it was sorry, it's on the next slide. The mobile energy storage study that they put out, where they had really good data, mostly on sizing of different or types of vehicles, sizing of batteries on different vehicles, and cost per kilowatt and kilowatt hour for different vehicles. We chose in our analysis the largest school bus battery capabilities that we could find, which were 220 kWh, 440 kWh, and 660 kWh, and these were from the Proterra Catalyst buses, I believe. So, based on backing into the capacity needed to serve the outages per day, so there's the 3-day, the 5-day, the 7-day you see in the chart below. With a 220 kilowatt bus, you see 10 school buses, 16 school buses, 18. With 440 kilowatt hour batteries, the 6 school buses, 8, 10, and then a bus with 660, there's the 4, the 6, and the 8. It's just dividing, right? It's just dividing the bus capacity by the need at the site, and understanding that we could round up to maybe achieve an even number where you can alternate charging. Okay. So, all right, I don't know why this is not, why it's cutting it off at the bottom. I'm sorry. I would like to see if I can, okay. I don't know why it's cutting off at the bottom, but I apologize. So cost to own. I apologize for all the words here, but it's kind of, there's a lot of information and it's important to understand. So based on the kilowatt hour figures, the cost per kilowatt hour figures from the mobile energy storage study from Mass DOER, we concluded that the cost to own the mobile storage solution utilizing the EV bus fleet would start at approximately $1.5 million a bus, and that was utilizing the 660 kilowatt hour battery storage capacity bus. And that was rated at a starting cost of $2,250 per kilowatt hour. The rationale behind utilizing the largest battery possible, of course, is minimizing the total number of buses needed to meet the outage period, right? So you could use the 440, you could use the 220, but it would require additional buses to meet the load. So extending that cost figure out, and based on the chart on the previous slide, we determined that the cost to serve an outage period starting from a 3-day and extending to a 7-day would fall in the range of approximately $6 million to $12 million for 4 to 8 school buses total, depending on what we were solving for in terms of the outage day. The caveat here is obviously this is kind of high level math. And so when we discussed this with Mass CEC, they wanted to make the point that there are pilot programs going on in Massachusetts where school districts have paid less per bus than what we're highlighting here. And that there have been grants awarded under the Act Now program that have significantly lessened this upfront cost to build out an EV fleet of school buses. But that being said, this task was to first, of course, show the capability of the charging station at the solar PV site and give an idea of what it could provide the town, and then kind of give it some color on if you wanted to use all of that energy to meet all, a specific load within the town, this is what would be required to do so. And so, the obvious next portion is that there needs to be a fair amount more research done in this area from a fleet procurement perspective before making a final decision on terms of an ownership model.
Mm-hmm. This is Tanya. So I agree that these are high cost, but what is the cost of a typical diesel school bus, just so we have a comparison?
Yeah, so in that study, it was quoted at $125,000. It's in the report too, but that was the number that was given. I think there's some analysis in the report that highlights the net savings that you get from fuel costs, maintenance costs, et cetera. I think is pretty substantial between an EV bus and a standard diesel bus. So there is, obviously upfront CapEx costs are substantially higher for EV buses, but then long-term, O&M, both fixed and variable, are substantially lower. So it's kind of a trade-off.
And so then I guess we can go back to the mobile energy storage study. What's driving this multiple? Because we've seen electric buses costs without the subsidies much lower than this. Is it because of the size of the battery?
Size of the battery, yeah.
And the storage?
Yep.
Piece?
V2G capability, size of the battery. Yes. Yep.
But if you went to a smaller battery, are we talking about a $400,000 bus? Like how?
Yeah. You could be talking about anywhere in the range of 250 to 500, but you'd also be opening yourself up to needing additional buses, because the end goal of this analysis is to solve for a load, right? It's not saying, oh well, we don't need to meet that load, so we could have buses with 200 kilowatt hour storage and we only need 4 of them. I mean, that's very certainly a possibility, but because we don't know the end load being served and the use case of the buses, it's very hard for us to determine what the fleet should look like.
Okay, but do you give the other costs, or are you only giving us the 1.5 million? And the reason why I say is because we presented to the sewer commission about what we were doing, and they pointed out to us, which is sort of like perfect, because you're right, we sort of identified mobile storage without an end load.
Yeah.
They pointed out that in the way that the Cohasset wastewater system is set up, there are around 760 privately owned grinders on site at the resident's home. And when the power goes out, those grinders can't grind. And there's about a day's worth of storage for everyone's stuff. And so what happens during some of those homes have backup power, and the reason they have backup power is exactly for this problem. I think it only takes one outage of your sewer backing up before you want to make sure it never happens again. But for those who don't have the backup power, and there are plenty that do, the Sewer Commission has gone around with a diesel-fired generator, connected it to the grinder, and used that. So this is a perfect type of solution. It's a low load solution in multiple places. It would require a 240 amp charge because it's an engine, but I mean, it'd be helpful if you could confirm that that is available through a battery storage capacity bus, the 240 versus the 120, just because the grinders need that voltage, and then include some lower cost options, because it may be that those type of low load but multiple location is exactly the type of need that we would have, that we could use a school bus for on the charging mobile storage solution.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I have to push back a little bit. The procurement end was not part of our scoping on the project, and so this was more meant to be a high level perspective on potential use cases. And I think that's part of our recommendation, is that when there is a better understanding of an end use case, there needs to be additional study work done to evaluate that.
I totally agree. The problem is a $1.5 million bus it's just not going to allow us to go to the next step. It's just, so, and there's just a lot of talking we have to provide to explain why, no, it's not really a $1.5 million bus. It could be a $500,000 bus. It could be a $750,000 bus. It could be a much lower cost bus. The 1.5 million is only because they went to the highest kilowatt hour battery storage capacity bus, and that raises the cost dramatically. So if you could put in some language to at least, or a range of numbers, or somehow explain that this 1.5 has an asterisk with a footnote. It's just that 1.5, I will say there was just a lot of shock and disbelief, and people ready to put the report down with that number just because it's so high.
Sure. Yeah. I will say, I think we do have a footnote that says that qualifies that as being the cost for a very large capacity battery. And I think we do address the fact that there are smaller sized batteries aboard EV buses that are substantially less expensive. Again, it would be, the issue there is that this was a mathematical exercise where we're meeting a load. So if you take that out and you just say, okay, we want 8 EV buses that are substantially cheaper than this, and they don't need to meet a 700 kilowatt hour load in an outage period. They just need to be able to meet a 100 load or 50 kilowatt hour load, whatever, 240 kilowatt hour load, like you said. That's more in line with what we're looking at. We can certainly direct you to studies that have those cost figures. We can add an additional footnote to make it more clear that this is the very top end of the budget, and maybe make it more clear what the exercise was trying to get at versus giving a procurement cost. That was not the intention. And I think I would also probably direct you to the Mass CEC staff, which during our discussions volunteered that they would work alongside you to work through the decision.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I want to make sure that we can use this report and not, get laughed out of a grant opportunity because of the costs and some guy who doesn't want to bother reading the whole report.
No, totally understandable. I think when we landed through the timeline of the project, obviously, because it kind of took a sharp left when we were, about 60% of the way through, the thought was that, we'll certainly quantify the capability of the charging, charging infrastructure through the PV array, and then we'll do our damnedest to make sure that we can give you some sort of use case, theoretical use cases that you could take and maybe, probably shop to another service provider who could give you more in-depth analysis based on a use case, and that was kind of the intent.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll talk with Mass CEC kind of at the outset of this and see what we can do in terms of providing, I guess, more actionable results for you guys.
Or just even, and again, I don't want to rewrite your report, and we're definitely not doing that, but even an appendix that, just using the mobile energy storage study, I'm sure they have different cost estimates for different types of battery storage capabilities. And if that could just even be lifted out, or put it in as a chart. But again, it's something that we can hang our hat on.
Yeah, those tables are included in the report.
Okay, all right.
But we can certainly revisit and make sure that they're they're highlighted.
Mm-hmm. And again, maybe it's just I read every single word of the report and I love it because I love this concept. And I think that there is a need, again, talking to the Sewer Commission and finding out that mobile generation is used for the grinders. That's like nobody's doing that with their buses. It's great. It's a great potential application, but it's just that price tag is so high. But I understand why you put it in. I understand why, and now I understand the basis for that price. And so if we did do a grant, we most certainly would come in with some lower numbers from a procurement or a competitive bid, or even, the mobile energy storage study and say, we don't need this level, that we're looking for this or whatever.
Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly right. It's just, it's very challenging to land on a use case without the end load that we're trying to solve for. But yeah, I appreciate the kind feedback there.
Okay. Thank you for your concerns, Tanya, and clarifications, Ryan, and definitely would be happy to connect more offline, Tanya, if you want to talk through, how we can pencil out numbers that look more reasonable. This is Reese from SEC.
Yeah, no, look, Reese, I think, again, we want to work with you. And I think that there's definitely appetite in this town for going electric on the buses. And the timing is now because they're starting to think about putting the lease out again. So they're going to have numbers to do the comparison for. So we are like, now's the time. This report is something we've definitely been waiting for because of the timing. So Reese, definitely let's sit down and work through it and figure out how we can showcase another example of the value of battery buses, because I think we're probably not the only town that has privately owned pumps that the water department has to go around and energize during an outage. Right. Because what happens, it's not about the privately owned pumps. The problem is the velocity of the system gets bogged down if the grinders aren't grinding and the churning's not churning. And so as a result, it mucks with the whole system, which is why they go and will charge up the private pumps. It's a decentralized way of doing it. And so even though it's not their pumps, they still go and they have to be able to make sure they work.
Right. But that's very exciting. Yeah, I'm happy to follow up with you.
Like I said, it's a whole new application that all of a sudden everything clicked together.
Right.
And again, something that I haven't seen.
Yeah. And our just for some background, our application, we were kind of thinking like, oh, okay, we're going to plug this into a school, right, or something of that nature, during an outage period, or an old folks home or something of that nature, or medical center.
To be honest, that's what we imagined from the beginning. In fact, I calculated out how many buses we would need at what kilowatt hours to be able to do round the clock at the emergency response center for Deer Hill. So that was how we were thinking about it. It just goes to show we're sort of Dora the Explorer here, right? We don't know all the answers. We have to go step by step. And the conversation with the Sewer Commission suddenly identified a perfect application of the mobile energy storage concept that you guys have been working on. So No, look, this is why we're having this conversation, so we can understand the numbers and the implication and the assumptions. And Reese, we definitely want to talk and figure out some action items to be able to move forward. We've kept the capital budget committee in the loop on this. They're very interested in electric buses, and they're even interested in doing the upfront payment and recovering revenue downstream. So we're totally on board and would love to work with Mass CEC on this type of project, again, because I think it could highlight a whole new application that other towns probably grapple with as well.
Terrific. Exciting.
Cool. So there was one other item on this that I wanted to highlight, and I think it's probably pretty relevant considering what we just discussed. If the town isn't wed to the EV bus perspective, there are alternative solutions to mobile storage, right? So there's a trailer storage option that we evaluated. And we did do the cost buildup in a similar way as with the EV bus up top. We obtained, cost per kilowatt hour data and applied it to an end load for an outage period. But the costs for that solution were substantially less expensive. So it was a total cost of about $1.1 to $1.2 million per trailer. And for a 7-day outage, so the very extreme level of outage period, it would have required 2 trailers, right? And so that ranges from like a $2.2 to $2.5 million cost out. We also, based on that analysis, were able to get in touch with a mobile storage developer, a private mobile storage developer, and work through some of the use cases. They requested that their name be kept private because of proprietary cost data, but they were able to share a lot of information with us. And so we were able to give them kind of the use case here. And they shared that a single 250 kilowatt, 2,000 kilowatt hour trailer mounted storage solution would cost about $1.1 million with all the services included, monitoring, data storage, et cetera. And then therefore, I apologize, for the 2 trailer solution, it would cost about $2.2 million, which is kind of the lower range of the analysis that we worked through, above with the Mass DOER cost example. So, it's an option. I think it's a much lower cost option. It's again, if the kind of the dual use school bus and V2G use case isn't critical, it's certainly something to consider. We didn't share the lease information here on the chart, mostly because there wasn't a lot of cost information that we were able to obtain for leasing a V2G EV bus and a V2G trailer. It just doesn't seem like that market is as well developed. But the developer for the trailer storage told us that they would consider lease options, but generally they don't consider them for 1 or 2 units. It has to be a larger fleet that they're leasing out. Again, it's an option. If that is of interest, we can certainly put the town in touch with that developer, and you can work through them in terms of getting quotes and et cetera. But that was just one option we wanted to highlight that we thought was a viable option, especially considering the ability to cover the outage periods based on the load figures that we had, and then also keeping costs to a minimum. So, okay, so funding I'm sorry, was somebody chiming in? No, okay. So the funding opportunities, in the report, we did maintain a lot of the ones from the Elm Street assessment, the brick, the various ones highlighted there, but green communities, et cetera. But there was some specific EV vehicle related funding that we wanted to highlight, all of them through federal funding. the low or no emissions grant, congestion mitigation and air quality improvement grant, and the build discretionary grant. We thought the one that was probably the most viable would be the low or no emissions grant, and that's strictly because the next two, the first one, the CMAQ, is basically geared more towards states that have severe pollution problems, which tend to be located in the southern portion of the United States and Midwest, and Massachusetts has a very stellar record in terms of air quality, and so it might not be as likely to obtain funding through that grant. And then the build discretionary grant program tends to focus more on rural communities. That being said, still a possibility. They help improve infrastructure conditions, public health issues, and regional connectivity, which again would be within the confines of this project. But the lower no emissions grant is an 85% maximum funding for the total cost of the project. For vehicle related infrastructure, it would be 90%. The largest grant that they handed out in 2020, which was when we had the discussion with them, or was the current year for when we had the discussion with the FDA, was $7 million. So, it's a competitive grant, of course, but there's a substantial amount of funding placed within the lower no emissions grant, and we thought that there was a likelihood that Cohasset would be able to successfully fund at least a portion of the mobile storage solution plan if they were able to obtain grant funding through this program.
This is helpful, and I have to say I do love the references to grant funding. So thank you.
Of course, yeah. No. Okay, so recommendations. Again, this project, like we've kind of beaten to death at this point, but it's it did take more of a theoretical turn, and so making recommendations is challenging when you're dealing with hypotheticals. But from our perspective as the project team, we did recommend pursuing the development of the charging station infrastructure and the mobile energy storage solution. It seems like from our general opinion, it seems like it would provide significant value to the town from a resiliency perspective. It's a novel idea that is being tested throughout the country and the state, and so it put Cohasset at the forefront of being part of that solution, which is important. Our perspective was that based on the math that we were doing to cost things out, owning a mobile trailer-based solution versus the EV bus solution was the most economic while still maintaining the ability to meet outage periods through a mobile storage solution. And so we were recommending that. But the caveat again is that we recommend additional research and study work and utilization of Mass CEC resources be done prior to making any any significant investment or procurement decisions. We view the operating or business strategy, the optimal strategy would be 100% town ownership. It's mostly because there's not a well-defined lease V2G market that we are aware of through our research, and so ownership kind of makes the most sense there. Again, probably an area to research a little better, but the market doesn't seem as well developed for a lease V2G. And so, to give Cohasset the most autonomy over the assets in terms of how they're used and how they're discharged and charged would be to own the options, or at least to strike a deal with a third party where they have full autonomy, but maybe not responsibility for the assets. I think Tanya, you alluded to that as a possibility. And then lastly, again, additional research into the use case, the end use case. So who is using the mobile storage solution, where are the batteries being drawn down, if they're going to buildings, what needs to be done at the what kind of upgrades needs to be done at the buildings to receive those charges, and you know, a review of vehicle options to a more significant degree. I think, you know, again, I'll reiterate what we talked about with Mass CEC. They are more than willing to share their resources and help here. You know, we would like to advise as much as possible throughout the rest of the project here, but you know, it really does, I think, require a more full-fledged effort once the use case for the mobile storage system or solution is kind of nailed down. So so that's it for us on DPW. Thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. This was a really cool project, I will say. It was challenging, of course, but it was really fun and really interesting to learn about you know, the space and how it's developing. And we really hope that, you know, the work that we've done here feeds into a solution for the town to use and make use of you know, the solar array and you know, the really cool idea of you know, kind of sharing that around the town to buildings in need. So thank you very much, and happy to take questions and comments.
I just want to thank you for all of your time, and like you said, you did like a 90-degree turn on this one partway through. So I'm sure it was not what you expected, but I think the end result is very helpful. I mean, this is one of those things, one of those reports that we could take to the bank, if you would. I feel like this has, especially if we get a valid end use case that provides a lot of value and is feasible. This sort of takes the electric buses to the next level, right? It's no longer V to G, vehicle to grid, it's vehicle to grinder for us, right? So it's snappy, it's fun, it's a case study, it's interesting, it provides one more value proposition. There's obviously cost that goes with it, but if we looked at different alternatives for that particular use case, I think we could get the economics down, and a 90%, 80% funding opportunity, if those are still available, would make this a total go. And the town is totally interested in, if it comes down to owning it, to realize these types of values, they're totally up for it. The decision to lease previously was just because the maintenance, we're not in the business of maintaining buses.
Right.
And it was becoming a problem. But if they're an electric bus where the maintenance is under warranty by the provider, or not, you know, not as much of a problem because there's so many fewer moving parts, the town is very interested in this. So I'm hoping that this will be that project that you can say, we knew it when it was a 90-degree turn in the middle of a project that we had no idea what we were getting into. But I do think it has legs, and I think it's an exciting opportunity. And Reese, I'm sending an email right now to Brianna to ask her to coordinate a call, if you don't mind, with you and the school committee and the capital budget committee, and potentially our DPW or other, just because this is one of those things that's so multidisciplined, and our sewer commission and our advisory committee, but just to pull together a bigger group from within the town that can work through the details on this so that we can make the right decision as we enter into our next round of leasing, which might end up being a buy, right? So it might be a 20-year decision for us, and but the timing is now, and we'd like to be in front of the curve, not, you know, wait 4 years from now to try to do it when money is not available and it's, you know, all done. So something we're totally interested in being a guinea pig and trying these things out. And so Reese, expect an email from Brianna if you could, and let's talk about next steps on this one. But thank you to the team for being creative and innovative and flexible on this, because I think, like I said, this is, I know the other project has legs as well, but this one just has some, it's potentially a good solution.
Yeah. Yep.
Terrific. I'll definitely eagerly look forward to that email, Tanya and Brianna. And I know that my supervisor is also very interested in this, Ariel. So we look forward to connecting further, and just want to second your gratitude to the consulting team here for all the excellent work you've done on this, and really something that could go far. So it's exciting and novel.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate it. And again, it was a pleasure to work on it. And like you said, we're excited to see where this goes. We hope it gets put into action and becomes a big help for the town. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep. Okay. Bill, are there questions on the chat?
There is nothing in the chat as of right now.
Okay. Well, we are at the 4 o'clock mark. So please feel free to email, share any questions that you might have that you come up with either at the outset of the presentation here, or if you go back and revisit the reports and something comes up that you maybe forgot to ask, or something new, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer those questions. Like I said, I'll take the list of questions from the chat that maybe had some more detailed information that I wasn't able to answer on the spot, and I'll share that out with the group. But I just want to reiterate, we're very thankful for the opportunity to work with Cohasset and with Mass CEC on these two sites. It was really educational, really fun, really interesting, and we just hope that it's ends up being of value to the town, and helps you guys move forward in your efforts to be more resilient and improve operations within the town. So thank you very much. Appreciate everything. So
Yeah, no, thank you. This is definitely not, these are not reports that are just going to like land and thud and not be used. We are in the midst of designing a downtown microgrid across public rights of way with National Grid for the upcoming BRIC grant. Okay. And so having this information is very valuable to us. And so we appreciate the time that it took to get it here and your professionalism throughout. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. We appreciate it. Okay, well, I will say goodbye. Thanks, everyone. Again, please